We're gonna make some coffee in the very messy kitchen that I have not had the energy to clean, because that's why we have a sink. You have a sink so you can put all the dirty dishes in and then deal with them later. I think I said we were gonna make coffee. I realized I don't have anything decaf and it's 6 p.m. so we're gonna make tea instead. I think our two options are soothing caramel bedtime and nighttime organic tea. I think I'm gonna go with the soothing caramel. This is gonna be our mug for tonight. I got it at a thrift store. I have this thing with only purchasing handmade mugs. And this one has some initials on the bottom. So if you made this, shout out to you. We're gonna make some tea and talk about grief, which is something that I've been experiencing in astronomical amounts lately. And I wanna just get how I'm feeling off my chest and see if anyone else feels the same way. My tea tab tonight says, "It is the light in the lantern which shows you the path, not the lantern." While the tea is brewing, I'm going to get you set up so that we can talk. Oh, you're so high up. I'm just gonna preface this video by saying that it's not going to be a happy, positive video because I'm not feeling very happy and positive, and I haven't been for a very long time. My chronic illness is taking over my life in more ways than I originally thought or wanted to believe. The water is boiling, so let's go make the tea. Beautiful. Okay, now we've got the tea. I haven't been doing well. What are they called? Like hobbies? I think hobbies are supposed to be good for you if you're depressed or anxious, and I have always loved making videos. I've tried to make YouTube videos several times before and always kind of talked myself out of it. Let's start with the definition of grief. So according to the American Psychological Association, grief is the anguish experienced after significant loss, usually the death of a beloved person. Grief often includes physiological distress, separation anxiety, confusion, yearning, obsessive dwelling on the past, and apprehension about the future. I have recently, in the past few months, really started to accept the fact that I am chronically ill and that I probably will be for the rest of my life. We're still solidifying what exact chronic illness I have. We are like 99% sure that I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. Basically, I've been sick for a very long time. My symptoms started, well, with, I think the Ehlers-Danlos, they've always been around. I just haven't been fully aware of them. And I didn't really grow up in a family that like believes in chronic illness, which I think is a story for another day, the trauma of that. But we'll just say that my symptoms started when I was a kid, but they started to get really serious when I was in college. I had a lot of pain that could not be explained with any sort of lab tests. Along with the pain, I also had pretty severe fatigue. The summer of 2021, I was basically bedridden. I also wasn't working at the time because I had quit my job because I knew I was sick, but I didn't really know what exactly was going on. Going to the grocery store would take me out for the whole day. Like I would go to the grocery store, it would maybe take an hour and a half, the whole venture. And then I would come home and I would be glued to the couch. I was so fatigued. And I remembered going to several different doctors, and one in particular was like, "You're depressed, here's some Wellbutrin." So I kind of just accepted it as it was. I was like, okay, I guess I'm depressed. This is really severe depression. That would kind of be the trend for the next few years. And it's also been something that I've been dealing with for so long that although I may not have a specific name to put to the illness, I have the experience and I have been dealing with this for long enough that I understand what life is like with these symptoms, and I also understand the psychological impact that these symptoms take on somebody. According to Wikipedia, the most outstanding source out there, a chronic illness is a health condition or disease that is persistent or otherwise long-lasting in its effects, or a disease that comes with time. The term chronic is often applied when the course of the disease lasts for more than 3 months. If we go back to the definition of grief, the main component of grief has to do with loss. You've lost something. Now, a lot of the times when people talk about grief, they talk about losing a specific person, but we know that grief is complex. I want to go to that one part of the definition of grief that talks about obsessive dwelling on the past and apprehension about the future. If we look at like 2020, for example, I don't know about you, but I definitely thought about like life before the pandemic and then also moving forward, what was going to happen. I very much was like, oh, I wish I would have like been more present in 2019. And also, I don't know what's going to happen in the next few years. Now that it's 2024, I feel like this concept very much applies to chronic illness. My symptoms have definitely gotten worse, especially over the past few years. And I kind of look back on before my symptoms were really bad, or before they were really intense. And I kind of think about like, I wish I would have been more present at that point in my life because I didn't know what was coming. And also, I don't know how this is going to progress as I continue with life. If I continue to get more sick, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for the people that I love? What does that mean like for the trajectory of my future? I think there's like an era of comparison with that as well, where I look at like people my age, people are getting married and they're having kids. And while I'm still figuring out what's going on within my body, I'm not sure that for me, having children is the right decision right now. I don't think I'm in a place to be able to do that. And I think that there's some grief with like not knowing when I'll be able to get to that place, but also like looking around and seeing how other people are living their lives in comparison to mine and feeling like I'm missing out on certain parts of life. I definitely struggle with feeling like I missed out on certain components of my 20s simply because I just wasn't able to. I really struggle with traveling because typically with traveling I get really sick. I struggle even at this point as my illness has like progressed. I struggle with making and maintaining friendships because I don't know at what point I'm gonna get really sick. I hung out with my friend the other day and we had gone down by one of the rivers in the city that I live in. It wasn't even that hot. I think it was like 75 degrees and we sat out by the river for like 2 hours. And the next day I felt like I had been hit by a truck. Like I could not get off the couch. I literally felt like the fatigue that you get when you have the flu, but without having the flu. And she had texted me and was like, oh my goodness, like thank you so much for coming over. And I like didn't even have the energy to respond to her. I've learned to accept that I have a slow response time because at any given point in the day I could become really sick. But it still made me feel really sad to recognize that that's probably how things are going to continue to be. And I think that that's the point of understanding how grief affects chronic illness, is that it almost feels like there's a sense of permanency that you just have to accept. But even that permanency is uncertain. So what I mean by that is like if you have a chronic illness that you know is going to be lifelong and you know that you're going to have to be managing it for the rest of your life, I think there's a point where you come to accept that. But at the same time, even if you know that you have to be managing it, you don't know how it's going to continue to grow and progress. You don't know how your symptoms are going to sort of morph and change over time. So there's a level of accepting the chronic illness, but also not knowing how it's going to continue to affect you that I think can be really scary. And it feels very overwhelming for me as a person. And I'm like this is a commitment. This is the biggest commitment I've ever made, is me and this chronic illness, right? But also like being okay with knowing that 5, 10, 20 years from now, my health could look very different for better or for worse. And I just have to accept that. The most like insidious part of this whole journey is feeling like I'm struggling to make sense of what this all means for me and like struggling to find a sense of meaning in this illness. And I think what I'm coming to realize is like there might not be any meaning to make sense of. I'm deconstructing how I think about like the universe and, you know, the greater picture and the higher power and all of that. But I'm not sure that there's much meaning for me right now. And maybe that could change, or maybe it doesn't change. But I think there's this almost like existential question of like, why am I experiencing this? Why am I going through this? Why am I sick? Why am I being affected in this way? And I don't really have the answer for that, but it's something that's kind of weighing on me every day, I really delayed the acceptance of my own illness. I understood that there was something not right. There was something askew, if you will, in my body. And I like was trying to get answers, and I was like trying to figure out what was going on, and I was like trying different things, like, you know, giving up gluten, giving up dairy, taking my probiotics, taking psyllium husk, you know, all those things. But I don't think I fully accepted the severity of the illness until I was talking to my doctor, and she was like, yeah, it might be Ehlers-Danlos and it might be POTS. And I thought I would be happier hearing that we might have a definitive answer, because up until this point it's just been like, okay, we ran this test, like we ran the test for celiac, you don't have celiac, and it's like, okay, cool, we still don't know what I have. It didn't actually make me feel better in the way that I thought it would. I thought finally getting a diagnosis would feel like a relief and like a sense of calm and, you know, feeling like I was finally in control. But it actually, I think the grief just like washed over me tenfold, because I was like, oh shit, like it's real, like this is a real thing. Up until this point, I've kind of, I don't want to say I've been in denial, because I've been experiencing the symptoms of it, but I haven't been like, I think, fully accepting it. It made this like overwhelming grief wash over me, and I was like, okay, now we know what it is. Now we have to start managing it. And I think that's the scariest part for me in experiencing that. One of the like biggest things that I want to take with me into the next part of my life is finding something that brings me joy. It feels like a full-time job to manage it at this point, but I also have a job that I have to go to every day to pay my bills, to be able to have my health insurance, to be able to manage this chronic illness. Like, you know, it's cyclical, and I need to have something that brings me joy. I think as humans, we all have to have something that brings us joy, but especially when there's so much uncertainty with your body and your mind and your health, I think having something that brings you joy is kind of works as a distraction, maybe on the really hard days, but it also gives you something to look forward to every day. I'll be honest, the past few weeks, I have not really been looking forward to each day. And I sat down with myself a couple days ago, and I was like, okay, we can continue down this path, and it's gonna suck if we don't find something that brings us happiness. And it doesn't have to be anything big, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. You just have to find something that you look forward to doing every day. And I genuinely have enjoyed making videos, but the imposter syndrome, like I said earlier, the imposter syndrome, it really gets me. I would encourage all of us to find something that is worth waking up for every day, even if it's something small, because that's what's going to be so pertinent in continuing our journey of healing and accepting this life that we've found ourselves in. I hope that you stick around. I hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you in the next video. Let me know what you think. Let me know what your thoughts are on grief and chronic illness. And yeah, I hope you do something today to take care of yourself and to find that thing that keeps you going, even if it's really small.